Ever feel like, you're carrying just like the weight of the world on you? Like every single email, every deadline, every single thing on your to-do list is just another brick just piling up on your shoulders.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of what we're diving into today, right?
Yeah.
This article, all about rest and motivation, how to find it, especially when you need it most.
And what's really interesting is how this article, it takes this whole idea of rest, and it goes way beyond just sleep, right? Like, we all know we need sleep.
Right.
But it digs into, like, those deeper levels, right? The mental, the emotional exhaustion. I mean, that's, I think, what so many of us are dealing with these days.
Yeah, totally. And, when I first saw the title of this thing, Finding Rest and Motivation, Overcoming Life's Challenges with Faith, I got to be honest, I was a little hesitant.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I thought it might be a little preachy,
Yeah, I can see that.
But I was so pleasantly surprised. I mean, it actually goes into some really fascinating psychological, aspects of rest and how it impacts our motivation, which I just thought was really cool.
It does. It really does. And it does such a good job of connecting those ideas, like those deep psychological ideas, to experiences that I think we can all relate to, like that pressure to succeed, the fear of not measuring up, all that. It can be so draining.
100%. It's like we're all on this productivity, hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Always striving for more, better, faster. But this article, it suggests that maybe, just maybe, that true motivation, it comes from somewhere else entirely.
I love that. It really pushes you to think differently. I mean, it argues that it's actually in the quiet moments, the moments of genuine rest, that we actually tap into, like our most driven selves.
So instead of pushing harder, it's about resting smarter.
Yes.
Now that's an idea I can get behind.
Right.
Wait, but what does that look like in practice, right? Like, the article mentions this thing called forest bathing. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. It sounds very zen, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually rooted in some pretty compelling research. So basically, it's this practice of immersing yourself in nature, right? And really engaging all your senses, what you see, the sounds, even the smells of the forest. And studies have shown that it can actually lower your stress hormones, even boost your immune system.
So instead of reaching for another cup of coffee
right.
when we're feeling burned out,
right.
maybe we should be reaching for our hiking boots.
It's an intriguing idea, right?
Right.
And the coolest thing is the article, it doesn't stop at forest bathing.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes that what's important is finding what genuinely allows you to unplug, to recharge, whether that is a walk in nature, or maybe it's meditation for you, or just even something as simple as spending time with people you care about.
Yeah, totally. And speaking of loved ones, I noticed the article talks about the importance of community, of connection. And it's interesting, right? Because it feels like we're always being told to prioritize our own needs, our self-care, all that. But maybe there's something to be said for, leaning on each other too.
Oh, absolutely. The article, it actually suggests that sharing our burdens, whether it's with a trusted friend, a therapist, or even a support group, it can make them feel so much lighter.
Totally. It's like remembering that we weren't meant to go through these challenges alone.
Yeah.
And sometimes just having someone listen without judgment, I mean, that in and of itself can be so healing.
Totally.
It's interesting, right? The article really emphasizes this whole idea of bringing our burdens to something larger than ourselves.
Yeah.
And while it does root that in, faith, I was struck by the fact that this concept, it could really resonate with anyone, even if you're not religious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you're totally picking up on something really important there. Because, it does use the language of faith, but it also provides a framework for understanding how connecting to something bigger, whether that's, spirituality or a sense of purpose, could even be just the beauty of nature, how that can really provide strength, especially when times get tough.
That makes a lot of sense. It's finding that grounding point, especially when everything else feels kind of chaotic.
Exactly.
But how do we tap into that, right? In a practical way, what does that look like?
Well, the article, it highlights prayer as one way, and not necessarily about asking for things, but just using it as a time to really connect, to find that stillness and to gain a little perspective.
But it's almost like meditation in a way.
Yeah. Precisely. It's about carving out that space, that quiet space, to just be present with yourself, with your thoughts, to find that sense of calm, when everything else is so crazy.
Totally. I can see how that could be so powerful, especially these days, right? When it feels like we're just constantly bombarded with information, with demands, with...
all the time.
Yeah, it's
And it ties back to that idea the article talks about setting boundaries. Because in order to actually create that space for quiet reflection, we have to consciously disconnect from all the noise.
Oh, 100%,
Yeah.
which is like way easier said than done.
Right.
Especially, I mean, come on, like in our always on culture.
It's a practice for sure. It's definitely not like a quick fix, you know?
Right.
But the article, it does offer like some really tangible strategies for setting those boundaries. One that I really liked was the idea of like actually designating specific times to check your work emails, your messages, instead of just being like tethered to our inboxes 24/7.
So no more like scrolling through work emails before bed.
Ideally not.
Okay, what a concept. But
Yeah.
but no, seriously, I can see how that could be like a game changer for our mental rest, emotional rest, all of that for sure.
It's about like creating those boundaries, those mental boundaries, so we can actually fully disconnect from work and recharge. And honestly, you know, that applies to all areas of our lives. It's not just work. The article really encourages us to be more mindful of our relationship with, you know, social media, our phones, anything that tends to pull us away from the present moment, really.
Yeah, totally. It's like reclaiming our time,
Yeah.
our attention, choosing like how we want to spend our energy, where we want to direct it, rather than just letting ourselves, you know, be pulled in a million
Well,
different directions.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. It's about making those conscious choices that are actually in line with what we value, with our priorities. And sometimes that means, you know, like saying no to things, even when it feels a little bit uncomfortable.
It's true. It's so true. Because I think like every time we say yes to something that we know is going to drain us, you know, we're essentially saying no to like ourselves, to our own well-being.
100%. It's about recognizing that taking care of ourselves, it's not selfish, you know, it's
Yeah.
essential. It really is.
It is. And that is a message I think we could all like use a little more of, especially these days. You know, it's funny, right? Like we often separate work and rest, like they're these two totally different things.
Yeah.
But this article, it kind of challenges that, don't you think? Like it's suggesting that real rest, that deep replenishment, that's actually what fuels us to do our best work.
It's a total mind shift, isn't it? Because, yeah, the article really argues that when we actually prioritize our own well-being, when we set those boundaries and then we show up to work, like actually recharged, actually recentered, we actually become more productive, not less.
So it's not about like sacrificing our well-being for the sake of getting things done.
Right.
It's more about recognizing that those two things, they're actually like totally connected, intertwined.
100%. And it reminds me of that saying, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
We have to like prioritize filling our own cups first. So we actually have something to give to our work, to our relationships, to, you know, every part of our lives.
That is such a good analogy.
Yeah.
And I like how the article, it actually gives some really interesting insights into finding meaning, finding purpose
Yeah.
in our work, even if we don't have like, you know, our dream job. Like it says, even small tasks can feel really significant when we connect them to a bigger why.
Oh, absolutely. Like whether that's helping a colleague with something or contributing to a team goal or even just knowing that your work, you know, in some small way makes a difference. It's about like finding those points of connection. That's what I think really ignites our motivation.
It's like finding the why behind the what.
Yes, exactly. And that like that feeling, that sense of purpose, that feeling of being part of something bigger than just ourselves, that can be so motivating, so energizing. It really taps into like that inner drive, the drive that fuels our best work.
It's like a ripple effect almost.
Yeah.
You know, like when we decide to put our own well-being first and we find that meaning in what we do, it kind of radiates outward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not just our own lives, it's the lives of like everyone around us.
I love that because it really brings us back to what the article's all about, you know?
Sure.
This idea that finding rest, finding motivation, it's not just an individual thing, it's a collective thing. When we support each other, when we're willing to share our burdens, when we create a culture that really truly values well-being, everyone benefits.
So, okay, what does this all mean for our listener? This person who's like maybe hitting play today, maybe feeling a little, you know, weary, a little weighed down by, you know, all the demands of life. What's like the one thing we want them to take away from this?
Remember, this rest is not something you earn after you've worked hard. It is an essential ingredient for the hard work.
It's about making that choice. The choice to prioritize your own well-being and not as like an afterthought, but as a fundamental, like crucial part of living a life that's fulfilling, a life that's meaningful.
And you don't have to have it all figured out. Be kind to yourself. Enjoy the journey. And never, ever be afraid to reach out for support, you know, if you need it. Sometimes asking for help, That's the greatest thing you can do.
Such wise words.
Mm.
And on that note, dear listener, we'll leave you with this final thought. What if, just what if, the greatest source of strength, the greatest source of resilience isn't about pushing harder, but it's about surrendering. Surrendering to the power of rest, the power of renewal. Something to think about as you navigate all the challenges and all the amazing triumphs on your own journey.